A single tomato field in California can determine whether millions of New Yorkers get the pizza they expect tomorrow morning. One drought, one trucking delay, one factory breakdown, and suddenly thousands of pizzerias could find themselves scrambling for ingredients. It sounds impossible. After all, New York is famous for pizza. The city has thousands of pizzerias. Tomatoes are grown all over the world. Surely no single person could influence something as enormous as New York's pizza industry. But hidden behind every slice lies a secretive billionaire empire that most pizza lovers have never heard of. An empire built not on dough, cheese, or restaurants, but on tomatoes. And once you discover how this system really works, you'll never look at a slice of pizza the same way again. Picture this. It's 4:30 in the morning in Brooklyn. The city is still dark. Delivery trucks are already backing into alleyways behind some of New York's busiest pizzerias. Workers unload giant metal cans filled with tomato products. By lunchtime, those tomatoes will become pizza sauce. By midnight, thousands of customers will have eaten them without ever asking where they came from. Yet if you trace that sauce backward through the supply chain, it leads to a fascinating mystery. Because while New York may be the pizza capital of America, the tomatoes often begin their journey more than 2,500 miles away. Out in California's Central Valley, enormous agricultural operations stretch across the horizon. Fields run so far into the distance they seem endless. During harvest season, specialized machinery moves across the landscape like a fleet of military vehicles. Millions of tomatoes are collected at astonishing speed. Entire truckloads leave the fields every few minutes. This isn't farming as most people imagine it. This is industrial-scale food production. But that's not the craziest part. The real secret isn't who grows the tomatoes. It's who controls what happens next. Most consumers assume tomatoes are commodities. One tomato is much like another. But the companies supplying America's pizza industry understand something different. The real money isn't necessarily in growing tomatoes. The real money is in processing, packaging, distribution, and controlling the flow of supply. Imagine two businesses. One sells raw tomatoes. The other controls processing facilities, transportation networks, packaging plants, storage infrastructure, and long-term contracts with major food buyers. Which one has more power? The answer changed the entire industry. Over decades, a handful of companies quietly expanded their influence across multiple stages of the supply chain. They invested in enormous processing facilities capable of handling thousands of tons of tomatoes every day. They built relationships with growers. They secured transportation contracts. They developed proprietary processing methods. Slowly, they positioned themselves between the farms and the restaurants. And that's when the fortune started growing. Because once tomatoes enter processing plants, something remarkable happens. Fresh produce becomes a shelf-stable ingredient capable of traveling thousands of miles. Suddenly, a tomato harvested in California can end up on a pizza in Manhattan months later. The transformation unlocks entirely new economics. Think about the scale involved. New York City consumes staggering amounts of pizza every single day. Some estimates suggest hundreds of thousands of slices are sold daily across the 5 boroughs. Every slice requires sauce. Every batch of sauce requires tomatoes. Every pizzeria depends on a reliable supply arriving exactly when needed. That reliability is where the real business opportunity emerges. Most restaurant owners aren't interested in negotiating directly with farms. They need consistency. They need predictable quality. They need deliveries arriving on schedule. And they'll pay a premium for that certainty. The companies controlling the supply chain figured this out long ago. But what happened next changed everything. As pizza culture exploded across America, demand for processed tomato products surged. New restaurants opened. Existing chains expanded. distribution networks grew increasingly complex. Suddenly, controlling tomato processing wasn't just a food business. It became infrastructure. And history has repeatedly shown that the people controlling infrastructure often become extraordinarily wealthy. Consider what happens when a pizzeria runs out of cheese. It's a problem. But alternatives may exist. Consider what happens when a pizzeria runs out of sauce. Suddenly, production stops. Pizza itself becomes impossible. Sauce isn't merely an ingredient. It's a critical dependency. And critical dependencies create leverage. The most successful supply chain operators understood this better than anyone. They built facilities capable of operating around the clock during harvest season. They optimized transportation routes. They invested in storage capacity. They expanded relationships across multiple regions. Every improvement strengthened their position. Yet consumers remained largely unaware. When people discuss pizza, they celebrate the crust, the cheese, the ovens, the chefs. Rarely does anyone talk about the tomato supply chain. That's precisely why it became such a fascinating business opportunity. Hidden industries often create the biggest fortunes because they operate outside public attention. But the story becomes even more surprising. Imagine a year when weather conditions dramatically reduce crop yields. Suddenly, supply tightens. Prices move.